Welcome to another episode of Capital Roots, brought to you by Capital Farm Credit, where we bring you the experts in the ag industry.
We get to work for that grassroots producer every day and helping them protect their livelihood.
We know it's important to bring the next generation around.
In addition to a few Texas legends along the way.
We're your hosts, Joe Patronella
and Clint Cryer. Thank you for listening. Now let's get back to our roots.
Welcome back, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of Capital Roots. My name's Joe Patronella.
And I'm Clint Cryer.
And today with us, we have Emily Lochner. She's the Executive Director of Engagement and Education. And we have Scott Williamson, let's see if I get this right, the Executive Director of Law Enforcement and Brand and Inspection Services, both of which are with Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, which is the oldest trade association and the oldest livestock organization in Texas. And if I mess any of this up, y'all feel free to correct me. But we are just so excited to have y'all here and happy to talk about all things cattle raisers. First and foremost, growing up, I never really understood that it was y'all that put out the Cattleman magazine. And I need y'all to know that that was like the holy grail at my house. When that thing came, all other magazines were thrown to the ground. I raced for it, and that is how it's been Sunday afternoons. That was it for me. So that was something that I learned recently that y'all do. I think that's so cool.
Fact of the day, the Cattleman is the longest running magazine in the state of Texas across all platforms.
Really?
The Cattleman is the longest running one. So we still do it every month.
We knew it was a good one. That's
awesome.
Wonderful. So I guess if one of y'all wants to just kind of hop in and tell us some of the biggest facts or best facts, or what are some of the proudest things y'all feel about cattle raisers?
Emily, I'll let you start.
Well, I'll just tell you a little bit about cattle raisers. So Cattle Raisers was founded in 1877 in Graham, Texas by just a bunch of ranchers who met under an oak tree and decided that there was too much law crime out there and too much cattle theft. And at that time, 146 years ago, they formed Texas Cattlemen's Association. And 146 years later, we're still going strong. And it's so neat to me to see how over 146 years it has evolved, but at the same time honored its, rich heritage and strong roots that we still, what Scott does and his department does is they still fight crime to this day. It looks a lot different than it did in 1877, but they still do that. But we fight in so many other ways. At the association, we fight something that may come in the stroke of a pen in Austin that affects landowners' rights or our right to, raise cattle. And so we fight, in that way. And we also fight, the barrier to entry and the aging population of the cattle industry. We know it's important to continue to bring the next generation around and support youth in agriculture and look to educate and draw these young people in so they want to be involved in the beef industry. And so I just, that's probably my favorite part is the really neat blend that Cattle Raisers has been able to accomplish of honoring, a longstanding heritage, but also adapting to 2023. Scott?
The law enforcement obviously is where my history is. I started as a brand inspector in 1987 with cattle raisers. So by far the majority of my career has been here. And that core belief that we can help the producer, as Emily stated, that we started in Graham, Texas, and we're rounding that corner here next week, February 15th of 1877 is when those producers met under an oak tree to decide to take back the protection of their property, their livestock. And so what is fun about this today, that we have that exact same mission, that I have 29 special rangers, 30 in our department along with myself, and about 65 brand inspectors that look at over 90 markets each week that are non-commissioned inspectors. but we get to work for that grassroots producer every day and helping them protect their livelihood. So when you think about cattle theft, it's commonly even asked of me, that really still happens. And just to give you a context for that, we were lightly staffed last year. We had a lot of transition going on and had 1,000 investigations filed last year, about 5.5 million in recovered property and livestock, which is, when you look at it in a 365-day average, our department recovered nearly 16,000 in property and livestock for producers every single day, 365 days of the year. And so that mission has not changed. And it's such a fulfilling career.
Definitely.
That's wonderful.
Definitely. So as we get started off talking about Texas Southwestern cattle raisers, I need you guys to help us settle a little bit of bet that Joe and I have. If we look at you guys' names, Texas and Southwestern, we kind of have a little bet going of what states you might represent or would be encompassed.
What covers the Southwestern is what we were talking about before y'all hopped on.
We have Texas and Oklahoma is formally where our coverage is now. I have special rangers commissioned by Texas Department of Public Safety as special rangers, and I have men in Oklahoma commissioned under the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigations as rangers. And then we have 7 men along the Red River who actually carry that dual commission and can work anywhere from Kansas to the coast. But in our original history, it also encompassed part of Colorado, southern Colorado, and New Mexico, and that was where that original came in that tied that together. Goodnight actually had an association in the Panhandle that had Colorado, the Panhandle, New Mexico, and when we merged, that was the denominator to bring that together.
Okay, so neither of us got it right, but between the two of us, we kind of got close, and so definitely glad we asked that question. Scott, that was all fascinating, and I want to get into some stories about whatever you might be able to share with us later. But Emily, before I forget, I want to go back to your kind of general walkthrough, and as always is the case, I love how Emily talks. She can phrase things so perfectly. I could listen to her talk all day. But you mentioned different ways y'all fight, be it a stroke of a pen in Austin or fight the barrier of entry for young farmers, and fighting in terms of education by educating farmers and ranchers. Can you touch on that a little bit, since I know that that's kind of a major component of your job and what that might entail and what that might look like?
Yeah, because I didn't know you were a fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to talk about that. So, it is an education of all SWATs, from the beginning rancher to those who are in it, have been in it for 50 years and are 6th generation ranchers. And so we cover really the gamut of everything in between. It's not uncommon for us to get a phone call of somebody who moved from California or Utah and they bought acreage in Texas, something that I'm sure Clint and Joe, y'all are very familiar with. Y'all deal with that on a daily basis. People moving in or people moving out to the country who are maybe 1st generation ranchers, and they've bought this property and now they have cattle and they don't know how to make it profitable. And so we create educational content for them because that's important to us, to take a holistic look of the beef industry and see how everybody fits in and offer education for them. But we also have a share of our membership that have been in it, and they have a good handle on daily ranching, and they need to know things like border security and carbon credits and the answers to direct to consumer beef. They're looking at a lot of other topics. And so we offer a lot of education for them. But really, in the last couple years, we have taken a hard look at our involvement and our opportunities for young people, high school aged, college aged, and young producer, which is a loose term that we call somewhere 25 to 40, but we really take everybody. And we realize that the average age in the ag industry is over 60. And it's important for us to look at the next generation. Cattle Raisers has been here since Scott said, next week it'll be 147 years, I guess. And we want to be here in the next 147 years. And we have to answer the question, who's going to do that? Who's going to show up and want to get out of bed and go work cattle? And so we need to make sure that we are offering the opportunities for these high schoolers, and we capture them long before they ever pick a major in college, and long before they've got something where they don't want to be in the ag industry anymore. That's important to us.
Yeah.
So we cover really the gamut of education, no matter what type of cattle operation or non-cattle operation they may have.
I think that's great. And we do the same thing on our end. We've really ramped up our YBS, Young Bidding Small Lending efforts. And it's to the same point, who's going to raise the cattle on y'all's end? Who's going to be able to have land to put those cattle on to raise them? Because at the end of the day, it's an industry problem, and it's something that we all need to work together to fix. So I love to hear that that's something y'all are doing, and know that it's something we're doing on our end too.
Definitely. And one of the things that we've looked at too is it's not just producers. It is producers, because as you mentioned, the average age of producers is actually over 60 at this point, whether we're talking farmers or ranchers. But it's everyone involved in the industry. Who's going to be the next Emily, the next Scott, the next Joe? We've got to prepare that next generation for production, definitely, but also in the other leadership roles within the sphere of agriculture as well. I did have one question. As you may have mentioned it, but how many members does TSCRA have?
Yeah, so we represent over 50,000 members across the state. So memberships, we differentiate it. We say we have about 18,000 memberships, which represent over 50,000 actual members, because there's obviously more than one person on a ranch attached with each membership.
Gotcha. So let's talk about a little bit about being a member of Cattle Raisers. What value does that provide me?
Scott, do you want to go? You want me to?
We're tag team this one.
Yeah.
One of them, and going back to our original purpose and mission, is the law enforcement security. So we have special rangers who have ag background and criminal investigative background to work on these cases. So in saying that, I don't want to portray that we are greater than any other law enforcement agency, but we're specialized in that. And more than that, our networking ability gives us the ability to investigate these crimes, because they have a large area that they can be filed in. So in other words, when your cattle get stolen, they're not going next door to the neighbor. They may be going to another state. They've got a wide venue that those crimes can be handled in. So that gives us the ability to work with all sorts of agencies. We worked with, from Homeland Security to U.S. Marshals, to Postal Service, Sheriff's Departments, FBI, a multitude of different agencies all over North America, Mexico, and Canada. And so we have the ability to investigate these specialty crimes where local departments maybe not have that expertise, and maybe just not have the time, because they're covered up with all the violent crimes. So the support we have for these special rangers, 100% comes from these members. So when you see that this recoveries in these cases that I've talked about, and the pickups that we drive about 1 million miles a year, those memberships are paying for that. There's no state, no federal, no municipal funds supporting us at all. And we don't only work for members, we work for everybody, because we look at it, if they are a criminal affecting society, one way or another, they're affecting our members. That membership is, to me, a critical component of supporting the security of agriculture for all of Texas, not just our members. So while that's, to me, a very, very significant, and what our core mission was, then all of these things that I'll let Emily talk about are definitely critical to supporting agriculture and its survival, which is the basis of why we're here.
Yeah, and I'll answer. So we have 8 departments at Cattle Raisers, and the Special Rangers makes up one of the 8. So I'll answer that. But I want to add on to what Scott said. It's not just cattle crimes that y'all investigate. I mean, y'all do the gamut of ag crimes.
Yes, and that is often misunderstood as being cattle raisers. We work any agricultural crime. So in these recoveries, it's been from all types of livestock and horses, trailers, saddles, grains. We've worked property stolen out. Matter of fact, one time I was working a case where it was saddles out of a saddle house, but they had backed up to the house and actually pulled the air conditioner out of this old couple's house. And so that's a long story in and of itself that was quite entertaining, but we were able to recover the air conditioner for the house. But in today's world, we're actually a high percentage of them are financial crimes, whether it's false identity, forged checks, online fraud, cattle sold through multiple social media platforms or digital platforms. We've worked a lot of bank fraud, hindering secured creditor conversions, just a gamut of all sorts of financial crimes as well.
Yeah, and so to add on what Scott said, we have 7 other departments that we offer our members. And so obviously our voice in Austin is huge. We have registered lobbyists in Austin, and they sort through thousands of bills that are filed each legislative session, and they look at things that are going to affect a right to farm, whether that's land ownership or carbon credits, like we talked about earlier. We're really looking at the fake meat labeling bill. This year will be a big one for us. So we really, Cattle Raisers looks at, a strong voice in Austin. Like we talked about earlier, educational opportunities. So we offer so many ways to get plugged in through education, online and in person throughout the state, throughout the year. And we have a huge history of backlogged educational content. We work with, like Scott mentioned, we are just so grateful to have such a great connection in the industry with a lot of different partners, including Capital Farm Credit. I know we've done a lot of work with y'all in the past about just educating farmers and ranchers. And so, so we have that, but we also provide event opportunities for our members to come and get together, which after 2020, we're also so grateful for, and we really relish it now.
Yes.
Oh man, the opportunity when you get together and see your fellow cattle raiser, 50% of the ideas that are, beneficial to your operation, let's be real, it's probably 90% of the ideas come from the hallway conversations, among your fellow cattle industry member. And we also have a really great communications team. Like you said earlier, the Cattleman magazine comes out once a month, but we also have a daily e-news that goes out every day at 4:00. And we talk about all the things that are happening in the beef industry, cattle prices, weather outlook, events that are coming up, and opportunities to get plugged in. And so, that's really great source of education and communication in and of itself. And then lastly, we have an insurance department. And so if you need health insurance, then it's hard to find health insurance in today's day and world, then you can come be a part of Cattle Raisers insurance company. But you don't have to be a member to be a part of Cattle Raisers insurance either. That's open to anybody.
So Clint, to answer your question, seems like they are voluminous amounts of benefits that cattle raisers offer.
A lot of benefits there. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about it on this broadcast. But if, say, I'm an interested party that's interested in cattle, land, or other agriculture and see some value in what you're talking about there, how do I become a member of Cattle Raisers?
TSCRA.org. There's a lot of different ways, but TSCRA.org, you can join online. You can also visit us. We travel to over 60 events per year across the state. So we will be coming to a city near you soon, whether that's at a bull sale or at an event that we host, and you can join there. And Scott and I both have these great Cattle Raisers signs behind us. If you're a new member, you get to take one home with you. So hang it on your fence. And proudly show off.
Tell us about those signs, Emily.
Scott probably is better to answer that.
Or Scott, because those signs hold a great value coming from a legal opinion here. And so, I want everyone to hear about those.
Well, they, and I'm going to preface us both having these signs. One thing that I'm proud about our association, Emily and I, and many, many others, most of my special rangers have our own farm and ranch operation. So the perspective we have as serving the industry is from somebody who day to day has skin in the game. And so to me, that's a really valuable component when you know the emotion and the feeling and the value of their loss, particularly us looking at it as the SEF side, or Emily as the education side, and all of the things that she's involved in. But the sign is the poster child for TSCRA, that they and it is widely recognized. Matter of fact, people will sometimes say, if I'm outside of my ag setting, who do you work for? And I tell them TSCRA, and I say, well, have you ever seen the blue signs? And they immediately, even if they're center of Dallas, they'll go, oh, I've seen that. And so that value, but I'm going to go back for the value of that you're referring to. We arrested a criminal that we had made over 50 felonies on, charged 9 arrests in 2 states, 9 arrests in different counties in 2 different states. And when we were interviewing him, we were driving crime scene to crime scene, and we went in a place he had stole cattle, and we went right next door where some cattle were very handy, and there was a gate on the sign. And we said, well, why didn't you go in there and get any of those? And he said, oh, I didn't know what that sign was, but it scared me. And he went over that gate to the next gate that didn't have a sign to steal the next set of cattle. And we have repetitively heard that people now have enough respect for the special rangers that they recognize when somebody's a member that is a deterrent. So there's great value in that signage.
For sure. Those signs are kind of iconic.
Yeah. Scott, any other stories along those lines, or any specific searches that stand out in your mind that might entertain a listener or two that you'd be willing to share?
Well, we could sit here for hours and tell stories. Some of that I'll just tie back to 2 that we've already kind of referred to. The air conditioner that we were talking about. We were in Oklahoma, and so we caught the saddle. We found the saddle at a pawn shop, and we picked up the gentleman, and we were interviewing him, and we were going to run a search warrant on his house. We were getting that prepared, and took him with us. And when we went to his house, the whole time he had been saying, well, we caught him with the saddle, so he didn't have much option. But he kept saying, I don't know anything about the air conditioner. So we go back to his house, and we open up these double doors in the back off the porch and walk in. And in the living room is this air conditioner. And he looks over his shoulder and he said, oh, I guess my roommate went back and stole that. So, it's just amazing how these thieves sometimes can think that we're really that unattuned to what's going on. But the gentleman we made all the warrants on, we had running a search warrant on his house and had game wardens and sheriff's departments and federal officers, and it had gotten into a pretty big event. And HD, my partner, and I were interviewing this suspect on the kitchen table, and game wardens were going through a freezer there. It had all sorts of illegal deer and animals in it. And he was lying to us another time. We knew it. And one of the game wardens reached in and pulled out a federal protected bird that was, I don't know what it was, 10 or 20 years in the pen. It was a big offense.
Wow.
And he knew that this gentleman was lying to us, and he leaned over my shoulder and held that bird out and pried out those frozen wings and looked at him. And he said, this penalty is severe for this animal, for this bird. He said, now, if you'll just go on and tell the truth, it'll fly right on out that window and never be seen. And he went back to talking, and we got a few more confessions out of him.
That's funny.
Well, nobody ever accused a criminal of being smart, Joe.
No, it did not. It did not.
I've actually got a personal story. A special ranger, actually a buddy of mine in Lubbock, you guys would probably know, Dean Bohannon, recently retired from cattle raisers, but he helped me actually on a cattle theft case that I was involved with personally. Just a quick story, but I'd sold a load of Hereford heifers and sold it to a guy. Evidently, he had quote unquote resold those heifers, picked up the cattle, shipped them, wrote me a hot check. Of course, I'm a banker. The first thing I did, it wasn't a cashier's check. So, I went to the local bank that he banked with and immediately asked them to convert that to a cashier's check so that I could go deposit the money. And they told me, Mr. Cryer, the check's no good. Well, come to find out, the guy that he had misrepresented these cattle to another gentleman that had bought them, delivered them, and he wasn't paying him. So it was a problem. But
Yeah.
Dean actually we ended up getting the cattle back through, the help of cattle raisers and Dean's expertise. So that's a good personal story that hit, pretty
Very
close to
well,
home.
And Dean retired with over 30 years. He was a very good special ranger.
Wow.
Funny story about Dean. We got to be good buddies, and I worked at a commercial bank for a while, and he would always come in and visit. I think he actually may have banked there. I don't know. But if you don't know Dean's about 6'6", 6'7" or something. He's always been a big man to me, and he always has that 1911 45 on his hip, So I didn't know the whole story there. And then actually, you guys were a special commission Texas Rangers. Well, Dean explained that to me one time, and he came into the bank, a bank being a safe place, where weapons weren't allowed and such. So Dean came in and we visited for probably an hour. Well, he left, and then there was either a teller, customer service rep, or something came up to me afterwards. He's like, "That guy was carrying a gun." I said, "Yeah, I know." And she said, "Well, you've got to tell him that he can't carry that in here." And I said, "He's a Texas Ranger. You go tell him."
With that said, I want to make that clear. There's a Texas Ranger, and then we are special rangers. We're commissioned under a different item in the codes in Texas than a Texas Ranger. So while that's often misunderstood, while we're commissioned by DPS, and our authority is under the code is a special ranger, and we work closely with the Texas Rangers, but we are not a Texas Ranger. And we're not an employee of DPS. We're just simply commissioned, which doesn't sound like it should work. That for well over 100 years, the highest ranking investigative department in Texas and in Oklahoma would commission and give authority to special rangers, but not be in control of them. And it's amazing, as to my knowledge, we've never had a problem.
Seems like it's worked pretty good to me.
I'd say so.
To your point, Clint, anytime we travel, if we're traveling with staff or wherever we go, I always say I never feel safer because there's 30 guys around us. They've all got guns on their hip. It's a good feeling. It's a good place for us to work.
Definitely. What about financial crimes? You mentioned that, Scott. Any stories there that you might have investigated that hits home close to capital?
Probably I've worked many large ones, and up to over 10 million. But probably one of the most entertaining was a gentleman that we had worked him a number of times with different frauds and thefts and arrested him. And he got to the point that everybody knew him. So he created a false identity using the first and middle name of his grandfather, bought cattle in Starkville, Mississippi. And I tell people, they always ask, how do these even happen? Well, agriculture is an integrity-based industry. If you think about how much wheat did you cut, how much Draxon did you give, what your calves weigh, everything is based off of somebody's integrity. So he contracts to buy $250,000 worth of cattle from Starkville, Mississippi, has them delivered to Hardeman County, Quanah, Texas. They unload. He tells them, "Oh, I mailed the check. I guess, they didn't understand, and they were telling him he should have sent it back with the truck. Other thing, he's telling the truth. So they drive home. He pulls the back tags off of these, strips them, cleans them up, puts them on a fresh set of truck, changed names again, sends them to Kansas, sells them to a feed yard, puts them into another DBA, sends them back the money back to Texas, and puts it in another account. And through a series of photo lineups and IDs and tracings, we were able to identify him and made a case. The interesting thing about that case was we were able to, because of Texas law says that wherever it's stolen from, travels through, or disposed of. So it technically was stolen from Mississippi, disposed of in Kansas, but unloaded for a couple of hours in Hardeman County, Texas. There it gave us venue. We went to trial, and that is a very rural ag-based community. And a young girl ended up as foreman. And so I'm sure they felt some great comfort in that. But we got him convicted, and they gave him 99 years, which upheld through appeal. And I still would be interested. That was the maximum you could give by law for any felony, first-degree felony. And I wouldn't be surprised if that may have been the stiffest one ever handed down in Texas to be upheld. We actually ended up getting multiple convictions that we stacked. And the last time I heard, he had about 145 years to do. Yeah,
I don't want to do 145 years.
No, but I mean, I don't think any of us would have gone through the links he did to try to get that. That's crazy. That's a lengthy crime to go through. But I'm glad y'all caught him. Very glad you caught him.
The young lady's statement after the trial was over and they were interviewing some of the jurors, she just said, my family and my grandfather and my great-grandfather are all producers, and that could have been one of them.
Yep, that's for sure. So being that we're about about agriculture here, and kind of the roots in agriculture, you made a statement that agriculture is an integrity-based industry. I'd like for us to discuss that a little bit and what that really means.
I wrote that down too. Yeah.
And it's what we pride ourselves in, is that you can trust the strength of a handshake and the number of contracts. There was a case a great number of years ago. Well, I say great, 15 years ago, maybe longer than that. Oscar Black in the Metroplex defrauded millions of dollars in cattle, and a lot of it was investment funds from retired people. And it was a very large case. But the fact of the matter was that all of these had been done over good faith. And we've had several of these where the suspect would pray with people, and they prayed on laying out this godly aura around them to commit these crimes and to convince these people. I did an interview school at DPS early in my career, and the first day the investigator held up a Bible in one hand and rosary beads in the other, and he said, anytime your suspect in the interview holds up either one of these, he did it. And I hate to look at that way, but thieves have learned how to prey on our integrity and our wish for upholding that integrity. So if you look at, you send a set of calves to somebody, they're bought, they send them out there, you process them, put them out on your weight on gain. You're talking about what was the end weight, what was the shrink. I worked a case on Draxon. You think about that. At 5-weight calf, you got $20 a head. So you got 1,000 head that you were supposed to process with Draxon. That's a $20,000 crime. I've worked a case on where cattle were unloaded, and they were, what was the shrink on those cattle? So if you're buying or selling, either way, if you adjust that shrink 1 or 2%, that's at $1.70 a pound on a set of yearlings right now at 50,000 pounds. That's a pretty big check just off of one truckload. So you start looking at delivering 20, 30, 40 truckloads, those financial crimes get pretty big. But the industry wide is all based on trusting someone's word. that going back to that Oscar Black, we were doing an interview, and the district judge and the district attorney and the Panhandle were sitting in this meeting, and one of the attorneys jumped up and said, "Why would you ship these cattle without a contract?" And the district judge started laughing. He said, "What are you laughing about?" He said, "I've got 8 loads on the road right now, and I have no idea who bought them or where they're going." And I just know I'm going to get a check wired to me this afternoon. So it is such, we operate without even a thought of it being honest.
I think it goes to a lot of, we're just good people in the ag industry, and that sounds like a self-righteous statement, but it's just with the experience we all have in it come to be true. I mean, my family has a lease place that we've had since 2004 that's based on a handshake, and that's probably the worst thing I could say out loud as a lawyer. But I'll never change that, because I've known this family for forever, and we pay on time. We provide the labor, they provide the materials if it needs fixing, and it just works. And so it is entirely integrity based, and I think you'd be very challenged to find another industry that even comes close to being that way. And I think it's a pride thing, a thing to be proud of. I'm sure there's some pride involved, but I think it's a proud statement to be able to make.
Yep.
I think that's absolutely true. When I moved from West Texas into Fort Worth as director, it was a little culture shock because I could go to town without my wallet, and whether I went to the store, the feed store, I could go buy, a 300 horsepower tractor and not even have my wallet with me. And so it was to come down and realize that I was going to need, fingerprints and 3 children just to get, something in Fort Worth was a life lesson for me.
A little bit different. I was just going to say, sometime I'd like to visit with you, Joe. You're sitting here advocating for business on a handshake, but you're an attorney by trade.
I know. I was just telling you, it's probably not the best thing for me to say professionally, but personally, it's worked out well.
I agree.
So, Scott, is there any other thoughts from cattle raisers you want to throw out there?
I'm going to revert back and take this quick opportunity to a reminder to kind of merging the beginning and the end of these conversations. Our special rangers can be found at TSCRA.org and go in and find your ranger if you need any help. But that also includes a welcome to reach out to us prior to having any issues. There are so many things in that integrity-based industry. There are some things you can do to set the stage to protect you without having to go overboard or to lose the joy of that integrity. Take the time to ask questions. The old adage, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Just because somebody promises you top dollar doesn't mean you're going to get paid top dollar. So be careful to get out on a limb. Take the time, while you can trust people, take the time to double check. If you're buying something, make sure that you have somebody that you can trust, lay eyes on it. I buy bulls, and the people I buy bulls from, I've done it for many, many years, know them deeply. And they'll send me a bull without me seeing it and know that I'm going to pay them. And so that's the part of the industry that we love and we want to make sure we maintain. But if you're going on just social media to buy some kind of an animal, make sure that there is some way that you can protect yourself, because that's the greatest crime we see going into the future is deception.
What's that old saying? Trust your neighbors, but brand your calves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would say is just thank you so much to Joe and Plant for inviting us to be on here. It never ceases to amaze me at the breadth of the ag industry and the friendships that there are across the industry in so many different varieties, from capital to TSCRA to so many people that we work with in the industry. It takes all of us. And I truly believe that in the next 20, 30 ag is going to look a lot different than it does today. And the consumers that have questions now, they're going to keep coming. They're going to keep having questions. And it's going to take all of us together in the next 25 years to come together, the narrative and make sure that we continue to have a profitable and sustainable operation. And so, for us, the partnership is just invaluable, and across numerous partnerships that we have across the industry. So thank you so much for all that y'all do.
Well, thank you for all that y'all do. So, and thank y'all for being here with us today.
Yes, I agree. Thank you for the conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I think our listeners will definitely enjoy it. I think we learned a lot. I think I speak for Joe and myself, but I think everyone that hears what you had to say today will learn a lot. So thank you for that. And we appreciate what you do for the ag industry and for cattle raisers.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Talk to y'all later on. Take care. Thank you for joining us today on Capital Roots. Texas agriculture is the foundation of our story and what makes us family.
Capital Farm Credit's a proud member of the Farm Credit System. We finance farmers, ranchers, agricultural producers, and rural landowners, and we're here to make your vision a reality.
We've been serving rural Texas for more than a century. Whether it be traditional, innovative, or lifestyle, we'll help you cultivate new ground. We're all in this together.
Because together, we're better.